Alright, so welcome back to Plant Anatomy. This last video of Plant Anatomy, we're going to talk about flower parts and different processes that flowers go through. So, starting off with flower external parts, there's the sepals. Sepals are the green parts of the flower that cover and protect the flower buds before it opens. So as you notice in this rose in the upper right hand corner, those green parts coming off the edge of the flower, those are actually the sepals, and they would actually enclose the flower petals before the flower opens. And you also notice them down here in this diagram as well. Those are the sepals at the bottom. The petals, just think of the daisies, she loves me not. Those petals are the parts that you'd actually pick off on the daisy. So they're really leaves that are modified to attract insects for pollination. So the purpose of the petals is to attract insects and other critters for pollination and reproduction for that plant. So internal parts on a flower. There's the stamen. Think of stamen, it is the male parts of the flower. Alright, so within the stamen there is the anther and filament. The anther is a sac-like structure that contains pollen and male sex cells. As you can tell in this image in the upper right hand corner, that is yellow pollen grains. Those are the anthers right there that hold those pollen grains. Then there's the filament. The filament is the short stalk that holds up the anthers. Also in this upper right hand corner, these stalks right here, these stem-like organs in the flower, those are the filament, and their only purpose is to hold up the anthers. So the pistil. The pistil is the female parts of the flower. It is made up of 4 organs. It is the stigma, the style, the ovary, and the ovules. So within the pistil, there's the stigma. That is at the top of the flower in the upper right-hand corner. You can see at the very top of that flower is that the whitish yellow colored stigma. The stigma, we call it the sticky stigma because it is sticky. It is at the top of the style. The reason that it is sticky is because you want the pollen grains to get stuck to the top of this. And when the pollen grains get stuck to the top of this, they're then going to travel through the style, and that style is what holds up the stigma, and it connects to the ovary. So it's a tube that connects from the stigma to the ovary. Then the ovary is when fertilized, it becomes the fruit. So think of an apple. Inside that apple you have seeds. And when you eat an apple, you're eating a developed ovary of a plant. So then inside of that ovary is the ovules. Those ovules are what becomes the seeds. So they're the eggs or the female sex cells that become seeds when fertilized. So just like on the anther, the pollen grains are the male sex cells of the flower. The ovules are the female sex cells. And you can notice those down here. This is the stigma at the top. And the style, the ovary is this enlarged circular portion right here, and then inside is the ovule or ovules. So the functions of a flower. Its main goal is to attract insects for pollination. Secondary is to produce a seed for sexual reproduction. The only purpose of a plant is for it to reproduce. That is its main goal. That is the whole reason a plant exists, is to reproduce. So that is the purpose of this flower. It produces a seed for sexual reproduction. And then it produces a fruit to nourish and protect the seed. Alright, complete versus incomplete flowers. A complete flower, it has all of the flower parts. So it's going to have sepals, petals, stamen, and pistil parts. So it has both male and female organs, and it also has the sepals and the petals. An incomplete flower is going to be missing one or more of those flower parts. So if a flower only has a stamen and a pistil, but it doesn't have petals or sepals, then it's just going to be an incomplete flower. If it's missing sepals, but it has petals, stamen, and pistil parts, then it's still going to be incomplete. It must contain all 4 to be a complete flower. Perfect versus imperfect flowers. Perfect flowers have both male and female parts. It's either has stamen and pistil. And imperfect flowers, they only have male or they only have female parts. So a flower with only male parts is going to be called staminate. Think of the stamen, that's the male part of the flower. That's the reason it's called stamen. It only has male parts. A flower that only has female parts is called pistillate. It only has the pistil, so it's a pistillate flower. Alright, so fertilization and pollination. In fertilization is the process where pollen travels down the style and it joins the sperm off the pollen grain from the anther to the ovule, which is located inside the ovary of the pistil. But before fertilization can happen, pollination must first happen. So it's the transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma. So as an insect or a bee, for instance, rubs up against the anther of the flower, it's going to get those pollen grains on its belly or the hairs of its body, and it's going to get on the stigma of either the same flower or another flower, and those pollen grains are then going to get stuck to the stigma. And so that is called pollination, when pollen is transferred from the anther to the stigma. And then fertilization is that next step where the pollen is actually joins with the ovule. So the sperm, the male sex cells join with the female sex cells of the flower, and that will then form a fruit and seeds. So then you also must know the difference between cross and self-pollination. So in cross-pollination, pollen from one flower of one plant is transferred from the to another flower of either the same plant or another plant. And so that is cross-pollination. When pollen from one stigma or one anther is transferred to the stigma of another flower on another plant. And then there's self-pollination. This is the transfer of pollen of one anther to the flower of the same plant. So it pollinates itself. And you can see both of these diagrams down here indicating how those work. So additional terms you must know with flowers. There's the corolla, is auxiliary flower parts that doesn't include reproductive organs. This would mean all the petals of the flower. There's the calyx. It is external, usually green or leafy part of the flower. For example, it's all the sepals of the flower. So if you have all the sepals, that is just the calyx. And then you have the receptacle. It is the enlarged tip of the stem where a flower is born, as you can see in this image at the bottom. Fruit. As a result of flower and the use of the purpose of a flower, you will the end result will be to have a fruit. So the fruit protects the seed. In instance, right here you have the apple, and inside that apple, being the fruit, is the seed. And the fruit also helps with seed dispersal. So an animal like a deer may come up and eat this apple, and it's going to go and poop that or excrete that apple along with its seeds in another location. And so then you could have another apple tree in that area. Same concept applies to many other plants with fruits. So that's all I got for you guys today for flowers. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.